Thank you so much for the introduction, and thank you for coming here today. Welcome. I really appreciate it. So what I want to talk about today is things to think about as you're out there trying to identify and contract with a cloud services provider, and hopefully to have that ultimate goal of identifying somebody in a company who you can truly trust. And before I get into the specifics, one of my key takeaways here is that you need to make sure that you spend the appropriate amount of time from a due diligence perspective in evaluating potential cloud services providers. And before I talk, and I'm not going to talk about myself, someone told me a long time ago, when you're giving presentations, don't talk about yourself. Talk about the subject matter which you're going to talk about. So that's, I think, a good best practice. So I want to just step back a little bit before I get into the cloud, and at just sort of a macro level, provide some perspective as to, I think, what some of the things which are going on from a technology marketplace. And I want to lead off with this quote by Charles Dickens. Of course, Mr. Dickens was a terrific author. In one of his books, A Tale of Two Cities, he started the book saying it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. And I think that's a nice summary as to where we see ourselves in the technology landscape. And let me tell you why. I want to reference a second book, a more current book called The Fourth Industrial Revolution. This was written about a year or so ago by a gentleman by the name of Klaus Schwab. He's the founder of the World Economic Forum. And of course, World Economic Forum is a very influential group. And it's Mr. Schwab's proposition that we have just entered into a whole new era from a computing perspective known as the Fourth Industrial Revolution. It's a new era because we're going to be seeing great innovation and technology change, which we have never seen before. The amount of change and advancement is going to be coming fast and furious. And Mr. Schwab talks about how there's going to be great technology developments in the physical space. And we're seeing that today, right, with autonomous vehicles, robotics, and 3D printing. We're seeing that in the biological and sciences space, and we're also seeing it in the digital space with big data, Internet of Things. For the most part, this is all a positive development as we enter into this fourth industrial revolution. Hopefully these advancements will go a long way to dealing with environmental issues, poverty issues, and curing diseases. So the power and the potential as we enter into the fourth industrial revolution is really monumental. And in many respects, what is powering this fourth industrial revolution is cloud computing. Cloud computing continues to grow at an exponential rate. And we think, at least at Microsoft, that the cloud provides the foundation for the fourth industrial revolution. However, we're also living through some tough times, some tumultuous times, right? And we're seeing challenges. Over the past few years, we've seen these unprecedented data loss incidents involving a number of notable organizations across various industries. And the cyber criminals are getting smarter as technology advances. We're also seeing this great debate, which we read about every day. On the one hand, the need for government to get access to data to protect all of us in the interests of national security, but how do you also balance some important interests of timeless values in our country involving the right to privacy and the right to be free from unreasonable searches and seizures? And to get this balance, of course, is a difficult task. We're also seeing that as technology moves ahead, and we're dealing with 21st century technologies, the laws in our country are very dated, they're old, especially when you're talking about information privacy and government surveillance issues. And of course, as the cloud has been growing exponentially, there's a lot of cloud providers out there for you to choose from. It's become a crowded cloud marketplace. It may not be as crowded as any given Sunday to watch your New England Patriots play football in Foxborough, Massachusetts. I think that's where they play, at least. But the reality is, since there's so many cloud providers out there to choose from, it can be difficult to select someone which you can truly trust. And assuming you've made the business decision to move to the cloud, and you realize there's lots of business advantages in doing so, whether it's to save money, whether it's to free up time to do some more mission-critical work, whether it's to make you more productive, still, you're going to be entrusting your data with a third party. So it's important that you be able to trust that cloud services provider. We have a saying at Microsoft from our president and chief legal officer, Brad Smith, that nowadays companies are only going to buy and use technology that they can truly trust. And so you may say, well, Dennis, that sounds great. Trust sounds good. Help me understand, what do you need to do to select a so-called trusted cloud provider? So let me give you some thoughts and best practices. The first thing which you want to do, and I think this was mentioned by Lynn in her keynote address this morning, is you got to assemble the right folks on your team to do that active evaluation and due diligence. Now, your team does not have to be as big as the Patriots, right? You don't need 50 people on your team to do that due diligence. However, I think there are a core set of stakeholders who you should actively engage, what I call a core 4 set of stakeholders. The first key stakeholder, and of course I'm very biased, is I think you want to get somebody from your legal team, a lawyer, preferably an in-house lawyer who can assist you going through these due diligence sorts of issues. Hopefully somebody who is sophisticated in the area of cloud computing and information technology contracting. A second key stakeholder is somebody from your chief privacy officer organization. The privacy laws are changing and moving forward as we speak. We've seen some terrific changes in the European Union, so you want to make sure you get a privacy professional in the loop. A third key stakeholder is in the area of your chief security organization. To have terrific privacy, you need to select a cloud vendor who has leading world-class security practices and protocols. And finally, last but not least, you want to get folks from your risk management and compliance function actively engaged so that they'll bring their own unique skill sets to bear in reviewing a potential cloud services provider. But the key point here is get these folks involved early and often. Don't wait until you've signed a cloud services contract, because that's much too late. I've seen instances time and time again when our customers don't get the right folks involved in the front end of a cloud services opportunity. So once you've selected your team and you've identified your team, now you're ready to execute upon some thoughtful evaluation and due diligence. And our customers do this in a variety of different ways. Some of our customers put together detailed requests for proposal documents, which we need to review and which we need to answer and we need to respond to. Sometimes we have follow-up discussions and Q&A and presentations. Some other customers will give us detailed security questionnaires to fill out. Whatever sort of methodology you use, I think it's important to have a common framework to evaluate any cloud services provider. So what I'd like to do now is to offer up to all of you a potential framework which you may want to use. And this framework is grounded in 4 key principles. So let me introduce them first at a very high level, and then we'll drill down in more detail. The first key principle is this notion of security. You need to work with a cloud provider who's really committed to protecting your data in their cloud. The second key area is this notion of privacy and control. You want to work with a cloud services provider who really goes above and beyond in protecting and keeping private your data, and is also enabling you to continue to own and get access to your data in their cloud. A third key principle is this notion of compliance. You want to work with a cloud provider who's going to enable your company to achieve their own compliance needs. And I think the fourth principle, sort of a foundational principle, is this notion of transparency. You want to work with a cloud provider who's very clear to you and the marketplace regarding their cloud business practices. As an example, you want to know where your data is stored in their cloud. So let's go through these principles one by one. The first key principle, security. You really want to understand from a cloud services provider what are their practices and protocols in protecting your data in their cloud. They should be using world-class data security practices in their data centers. We have a data center, actually Microsoft has over 100 data centers which are located across over 40 countries in the world. We have a data center close to me where I'm based in the Chicago area. Every time I go there, I'm sort of in shock and awe with the breadth and the depth of our security measures and practices that we enlist in our data center. Most recently, when I was out there, I learned that the fencing surrounding our data center is made out of the very same material which they use for the fences between North Korea and South Korea in the demilitarized zone. You can't run a speeding truck through those fences. Another key element of security is make sure your cloud services provider is using strong data encryption methodologies. As an example, Microsoft uses a number of methodologies ranging from perfect forward secrecy to 48-bit encryption. But find out what sort of encryption protocols are they using? And hopefully those protocols advance and get better over a period of time. Find out if your cloud services provider fights the cyber criminals. At Microsoft, we have a unique asset, which is part of our legal team, known as the Digital Crimes Unit Team. It's a team of over 100 professionals, some of whom are former Department of Justice lawyers, some of whom are former FBI agents, and for many years, they've been on the front lines trying to identify who these cyber criminals are lurking throughout the world. And we use a variety of sophisticated techniques to identify them. We partner with law enforcement to bring them to justice. But the key point is we learn a lot by fighting these cyber criminals. And everything which we learn, we put back into our cloud solutions to make them more robust and secure, and to also make our data center defenses more robust and secure. Second key area is privacy and control. Make sure that your cloud services provider is, as part of their cloud contract, is agreeing to very specific and detailed data processing agreement terms, which gets into the specifics as to how they're going to be handling and taking care of and protecting your data in the cloud. Find out what is the history of a cloud services provider's relationship with worldwide privacy regulators. I'm not going to name names, but there have been some cloud services providers who've had challenges in this area, who've been sued by regulators, investigated, and fined. At Microsoft, we have worked hard to build a strong relationship with worldwide privacy regulators. We think we have a strong track record with international privacy regulators. Quite frankly, we learned some lessons years ago in some of our antitrust challenges that we needed to do a better job to partner with worldwide regulators. Find out if your cloud services provider offers choice. A lot of our customers don't want to go all in the cloud. They want to have options. Make sure that your cloud services provider not only has a cloud solution, but also an on-premises solution as well. So, because they may want to keep certain workloads and data on premises. Make sure that your cloud services provider has clear contract terms to the effect that you, as a customer, retain ownership to your data. It's your data, after all. And a cloud services provider cannot use your data for marketing or advertising purposes, only to perform the services. And also find out, what does a cloud provider do when the government, when law enforcement comes knocking on their door asking for your data? Of course, they shouldn't just hand over that data. They should adhere to the legal processes, such as acquiring an appropriate search warrant. But you also want to find out, is your cloud provider willing to fight and to resist efforts by the government to get access to your data? Microsoft has taken the tough decision to sue the US government on a few occasions in the interest of protecting our customers' data. Let's talk a little bit about compliance. You want to work with a cloud provider who enables compliance for your company and for your particular needs. This is a graphic which shows just sort of a thumbnail graphic, if you will, and it's sort of like an alphabet soup chart, I realize that, but of the various different laws and certifications which Microsoft complies with for our cloud solutions. And we break this down from an industry basis, a US basis, and also outside the United States. I just want to call out a few certifications and laws which you want to make sure that your cloud provider adheres to. One important certification is known as ISO, the International Organization of Standardization. I'm sure many of you are familiar with that. But about 2 years ago, ISO came up with the first standard for the protection of data in the cloud, known as ISO 27018. Microsoft was the first major cloud provider to achieve certification with that standard. We write that into our contracts that we comply with that standard. You want to make sure that your cloud provider does the same. Ask your cloud provider, how do they handle healthcare-related data? Most all of our customers, even if they're not a healthcare provider or insurance company, and perhaps they're not subject to the HIPAA laws, but they still may have benefit or healthcare information pertaining to their employees, which requires additional protections. Make sure that your cloud services provider is willing to sign a unique contract known as a Business Associate Agreement, a BAA, which a well thought of BAA will enable healthcare customers and insurance customers to meet their HIPAA needs. So find out, what does your cloud services provider do with respect to healthcare data. The other thing I'll mention about ISO, there's also a newer standard called ISO 19068. It's a new standard you don't need to get a certification against, but it's an interesting new standard because it provides some guidelines as to what customers should be asking